And once we record this meeting, it's going to get posted on our website, so folks can go back and rewatch it if you'd like. Next up, I'm going to hand it off to staff. They're going to introduce themselves, and then we're just going to go right into it. So is there any questions about just kind of the format here tonight, or anything not about the proposals, but just kind of trying to fine tune any Zoom questions? If you do, raise your hand or type it into the chat. But we'll try to keep things moving along tonight. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and turn on my camera. Thank you for being here. And I am going to hand it off now to Neil Anderson. So Neil, if you wouldn't mind, oh, Neil just stepped away. Oh, he's turned his light on. There we go. Yeah, Neil, if you could introduce yourself, and then we'll go around.
Sure. So I'm Neil Anderson, and I'm the wildlife manager for Region 1 of Northwest Montana. And glad you guys could attend, and we'll go through the rest of the interviews or introductions before we get started.
Yeah, Mike, if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Sure. Mike Ebinger, I'm the area biologist in Thompson Falls, and just want to thank everyone for logging in and participating.
Thanks, Mike. How about Jesse?
Hi, I'm Jessie Coltrane. I'm the area biologist out of Kalispell. Well, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Jesse. And last but not least, Ethan.
Yeah, thanks, Dylan. I'm Ethan Lula. I'm the area biologist up in Eureka. Been here, I guess this is coming into my third winter now. So yeah, thank you all for attending.
Thank you, Ethan. Okay, looks like we do have a question. Can you turn your volume up? Tough to hear. Yeah, so I guess we'll all try to speak as close into these microphones as we can. But thank you, that's good to know. We'll try to make sure that the volume's up. All right, I don't think I missed any housekeeping items, did I? Crew, you guys are responsible to keep me from missing anything. If I think of something, we'll add it, but I'm gonna hand it off to you, Neil, if you want to kind of just explain a little bit of the background of the season setting process, kind of how this happens every 2 years, but then also what's different this year, and what folks should know.
Sure. Sorry for the backlight. It's not the best here, but so as Dylan mentioned, every 2 years we go through a season setting process. And that process is designed to address what we call structure changes, or changes to the regulations, how you might read them when they show up in the regulation book. So if it's a change to, whether it's switching to a buck only season or including antlerless seasons on your general license, those type of things, we do that every 2 years. Normally what we do is we have a scoping period, which is what we would be in now. And we still are in a scoping period, and that scoping period is an opportunity for hunters or the general public to offer suggestions on what they would like to see in terms of regulations. And we typically get a bunch of those through like a Survey Monkey or online type of a format. This year is a little bit different because we've been asked to try to simplify the regulations. And this really isn't just happening this year. This actually started a little over 4 years ago. A panel was put together to try to address some concerns a lot of the public had with our regulations. They felt they're getting too complicated, hard to understand. And as a consequence, we would get a lot of questions, primarily during the application process when people are applying for permits, licenses, those type of things, but even during the general season on how to read the regulations and how to follow them. And so that committee came up with some recommendations. And we'll talk about some of those tonight. And then the director this year decided to kind of kick things into high gear and asked us to kind of adhere to what those recommendations were. And he really focused on several aspects of it. So we're primarily focusing on deer and elk regulations. And there are a couple of things that he really wanted us to do, like remove all permits for antlerless animals. They should be for bucks primarily, is the thought process, because that seems to be confusing for folks. And we have a few of those. Also remove small numbers of licenses in the attempt to try to reduce the overall just abundance of licenses and permits that are out there that seem to confuse people. And another big one was to remove portions of a district. So in other words, if you have a hunting district, if you carved out a smaller piece of that and have a different regulation in that, there better be really good biological reason for keeping that. Otherwise, the expectation was we would probably remove that. So we took that very literally, and we put out some proposals here that we'll go over. And they are very much in line with what the director has asked us to do. Now, these are, I wouldn't even call them tentatives, they're more of discussion points. And what we really need is your comment. As Dylan mentioned, it's really important. So if you want something, you like it, you don't like it, you'd like to keep it the same, some other change, now's your chance to address that. And from this information, we can modify these and we'll come out with a final set of proposals, excuse me, that will ultimately go to the commission. And they'll go to the commission in November. Commission will review those proposals, make a determination on which ones will go forward as a tentative, and you will again have another chance to comment. So this is kind of a preliminary comment period. The final comments and weigh in by the public will occur after the commission puts things out, proposals out for an official tentative to be reviewed. And then if they do approve those, they will become part of the regulation package. Are there any questions on that process?
Remember, if you have a question, please raise your hand by hovering over your name, and there's a raise hand function, or type it into that Q&A. Any questions on just kind of this overall process? And we'll circle back at the end of the meeting to review some of that timeline that Neil just mentioned. So if you didn't keep track of those dates, we'll circle back on that.
Mm-hmm. And I believe the opportunity for comment here ends on the 20th. Correct.
Correct.
Okay. So if there are no questions, what I'll do is I will talk about the region-wide changes, and then we'll open it up for some comments. And I can go over each one, and maybe we'll, on the regional comments, we'll ask, we'll put out a discussion point or a proposal, if you will, and ask for any comments, and we can address those one by one. And then when we get to the district specific proposals, we'll have the area biologists talk about their entire area, all the districts in their area. And then we'll open it up for comments for that specific area.
And Neil, before you get going, I just want to walk people through to where they can go to see exactly what we're talking about tonight. So if you want to follow along on your computer, this is a way to do it. So here's our homepage. You scroll down right here on the bottom, click right on there, season setting, and everything we're talking about tonight is available through this page right here. So there's the timeline that Neil mentioned. If you have questions right here, you can ask a biologist right there. Here's how you got into the Zoom link. Here's how you can comment. And here's an interactive map that we're going to kind of use as reference tonight. So as Neil and the biologists start talking, we're going to kind of go in and use this map as hopefully a way to kind of visualize what we're talking about. And then scrolling down, here are the changes, the conceptual changes here. So region 1, everything we're going to talk about, we're just going to start at the top and work our way down. So Neil's going to start right here with the region-wide changes. And so if you want to read them, you can just click on that link. It'll open a PDF. Here's the other ones we're going to go through one by one. And then obviously here's the comment form that we're going to really try to steer people towards, because when you submit a comment in this way, we've got it all. It shows which hunting district you're wanting to comment on, and it's just really clear what the comment is. So trying to encourage folks to comment that way. All right, Neil, I will hand it back to you, and I'll just use this interactive map. And if you want me to zoom in on any one area particularly, let me know.
Nope, I think, see, we'll start with the region 1, the region-wide proposals. And I'll start with what we have are some antlerless elk permits. They're permits that are only valid for folks who have a permit to hunt from a vehicle. And we have those in many of our hunting districts, not all of them, but many of them. There's a couple reasons why we're proposing to remove these and eliminate those permits. One, They're permits which are supposed to go to licenses. And the difference between the permits and license, so a permit allows you to do something on your general license. So you buy a general license, a permit allows you to do that. That might be different than what's in the regulations. A license actually allows you to harvest another animal. So when we're talking about licenses and permits and going away from an antlerless permit for elk, for instance, and going to a B license, what that does in effect is allows folks to harvest potentially 2 animals in the region or in a district. Where a permit, you could only use your general license. So one of the issues we've had with permit to hunt from vehicles, and we enacted this about 4 years ago, is that there seems to be a lot of confusion over who can apply for this. In the last couple of years, over 60% of the applicants who have applied for this permit have not had the permit to hunt from a vehicle. In other words, they were not eligible to apply, but they applied anyway. So clearly it's been fairly confusing for people. There are also very small numbers, usually 5, I think a couple 10s, but very small numbers. So on a couple different levels, they applied to what the directors asked us to do. Remove those permits, but also get rid of those licenses where there's small numbers of them. And obviously that will potentially limit some opportunity for folks that do have a permit to hunt from a vehicle, but there could be some other options to bring that back on a general. We didn't propose that. But so right now on the chopping blocks are those permits to hunt for antlerless elk in many of our districts that allow people who have a permit to hunt from a vehicle to harvest an antlerless elk on the general license. Do you have any questions on that specific proposal or change?
And I'll be the guy that says this a lot tonight, but if you have, just as a reminder, if you're new to Zoom, if you raise your hand by hovering over your name and clicking raise hand, that will let me know to unmute you, or you can type it into the question and answer box.
Looks like we do have one in the Q&A.
Yeah, Casey's got a question. It looks like we'll answer that one at the end because it's more on statewide proposals, but thank you for that
Okay.
question, Casey. We'll circle back to that one.
Yep. So again, if this goes forward and it's approved by the commission, there will no longer be an opportunity to apply for what would ultimately be a license, so a second license in Region 1 for a lot of our districts for folks who have a permit to hunt from a vehicle. The next region-wide change is to change all antlerless elk permits to antlerless elk licenses. So those are B licenses. And again, a permit would allow you to shoot an antlerless elk on your general license. If that is changed to a antlerless elk license, it will be a different license. You could have 2 licenses, one to harvest in Montana or in Region 1, primarily a brow tine bull, and the other to harvest an antlerless elk. And that would be region wide. So anywhere where we had these antlerless elk permits, they would become licenses. Any questions on that?
Looks like Jacob Juresic has a question. So Jake, I'm gonna allow you to talk. If you could unmute yourself and go ahead.
Hey, Neil, is this proposed change with the antlerless elk permits to a license similar to how it was in the past, where you would not be allowed to harvest a brow tine bull in the same hunting district as a antlerless elk? Or would you be allowed to, I guess, do it in both in the same hunting district?
So potentially it could be. So we did not propose that right now as something for folks to think about. I know in the past, that's how it's been. It's been that way when we had the permits as well. That's something, if you're interested in having that, you can put it in the comments. We didn't do it because it does complicate the regulations a little bit. You have to read off to the side. And there's also some enforcement issues for our enforcement folks trying to determine who's got a permit could they harvest a bull or not, because it does not print out on your general license. So a person can have 2 licenses in their pocket unless they go in and actually look at what they have in terms of their licenses that they received. Is pretty hard to enforce. That doesn't mean we couldn't do it, but at this point in time, we've not proposed to do that. So that would be something if folks want to see, we need to get that comment from folks.
No, and I agree. I didn't like when you couldn't in the same hunting district. So I'm glad you didn't propose that. Thanks.
Yep. The one thing I might add that I didn't touch on. So last time what happened when we had B licenses, as Jacob mentioned, and we went to permits, a lot of folks ended up losing their preference points. So they'd been applying for those B licenses. They went to permits and the permits didn't transfer. When we talked to our legal staff and we think we can actually do that now, what that will look like, I don't know. So if we switch back to a B license, there should be a way for folks to retain those preference points and apply them to the license. We have to work out the details on how that works. But my understanding and what I've been told from our legal staff is that folks will not lose their preference points.
And that's same with bonus points too, right, Neil?
Right.
Yep.
Or bonus points, sorry, bonus points, yep.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Jacob. Any other questions out there? Raise your hand or type them into the chat. Oh, Casey Butler. Awesome. Casey's got his hand up. All right, Casey, I'm going to allow you to talk. And if you just want to unmute yourself and go ahead.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, hey, thanks. So I just want to make sure because I usually don't do the elk B tags. I usually just hunt off my general. But basically what you're saying is instead of applying for a cow tag, essentially, basically we could, if we wanted to buy 2 tags at the same time, we buy our general tag, which is good for wherever and whatever that district calls for underneath the general tag. But then we can buy the Antlerless tag that is good for just a specific district or just a specific region. So basically we could take 2 elk out, one being a bull or one being a cow in the same region, or is it basically we can take 2 elk out of the same area?
Yes, so basically that will be different depending on where you're at and where the elk populations are. So other areas of the state, you may be able to buy an over-the-counter B license. In Region 1, these will all be through a limited draw, since we only have, in some instances, 25 antlerless licenses available. So here you could go buy your general license over the counter, but if you wanted to hunt antlerless elk in Region 1, with the exception of hunting District 170, but everywhere else you would have to apply for an antlerless B license through the drawing.
Okay, I got you. Thanks.
Thanks for the question, Casey. Any other questions? Good questions out there. I'm not seeing any, Neil, so
Okay.
go
All right.
ahead.
If folks do have questions later on or they come to them, we can still entertain those. It's not like your only opportunity.
Totally. Yeah, no, absolutely. You please, if you think of something, type it into the Q&A, or you can raise your hand at a later question and we can bounce back. The whole goal of tonight is that open house kind of informal Q&A. So.
And so the next proposal that we put out there is, it's a little bit related to simplification, but it's also related to some of the changes on the landscape that we've seen here in the last year. So right now, for this season, as it stands on our general license for deer, you can shoot either sex whitetail in the first week, anywhere in the region that it applies, the different districts that it applies. And then on the last weekend, you can also shoot either sex, so antlerless whitetails on private property only, excluding some of the corporate timberlands. This has become problematic because, as I'm sure most folks know, that warehouses are sold to Southern Pines Plantations, and then Southern Pine Plantation has actually split up a lot of that property and sold it off to different timber companies as well as private individuals. And so now it's, instead of having just a couple areas where this license applies, It's got very difficult for us to determine where it does and where it does not apply, as well as very confusing for sportsmen on where it does or does not apply. So we're proposing to remove that last week of either sex. So our season would look like this. It would be first week would be either sex whitetail, and then the rest of the season would be antlered buck only. Now we can offset some of that antlerless harvest with additional B licenses for whitetails if we need to, but that would be a loss of opportunity on that last weekend on private property. Any questions about that? Okay, I don't see any unless you have any, but if somebody does have a question, please, again, don't hesitate if you think of something later. So that's the only kind of region-wide deer change we have. There's some other ones that the biologists will talk about. Some of the other things were not related to elk and deer, and they're actually fairly simple. So right now in your black bear regulations, you have to know what bear management unit you're in, which is confusing to folks. And what we're going to do is just remove the bear management units and just ask you to report basically the deer elk districts. So it'll be deer, elk, bear. And we're going to do the same thing for lions. We're going to try to make sure that there's consistent with the deer and elk regulations. Won't really be a change in terms of the season so much. It's just more of a change in the reporting for folks. So you don't have to worry about which bear management unit you're in. You just have to know which elk and deer hunting district you're in. But that would be true for both black bears as well as mountain lions. Any questions on that? Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, Neil. So those were just the region-wide changes. Now I will go back to the map and we will kind of start going through some of these specific hunting district level changes. And I'm going to start with Ethan Lula, and he is going to go over some of the proposed changes in HD 101. So go ahead, Ethan. And let me know if you need me to scroll in or out or open any other maps or anything for you. I've got this map as well, if you need this map, which shows.
Sure, I've got one too. If I don't know, we'll just stick with that one.
Okay.
So I guess, yeah, the first one we'll start with is the boundary changes, starting north into hunting district 101 and 109. Currently 109 and 101 are split by Highway 93, coming down, and I just lost the screen. I don't know if that's the
sorry.
feeling.
That's my fault. Sorry. There we go.
Yeah, anyways, split by Highway 93, as you can see by that line there. This proposal to, as per the director's objectives to combine hunting districts, would remove that boundary, combining the two hunting districts. What that would do as far as changes to the regulations, our elk regulations would remain pretty consistent in there. There is the antlerless elk opportunity, the shoulder season opportunity there. But the permits that are currently given out are already valid in either hunting district. What would change relates to our mule deer. Currently in hunting district 109, there is a hybrid season sort of a deal where we have the first 3 weeks are open for mule deer harvest on general license. But the last 2 weeks of the season are restricted to permit holders only, which are on a limited draw system. That permit system, or that season system, was essentially put in place to provide a little bit more security during the rut. Whenever we have the migratory population of mule deer as they come out, and we were seeing some pretty heavy harvest in what we've seen, the perception was there's been some heavy harvest of younger bucks, and that season was put into place to maintain an older age class of deer in there. What this proposal currently as it sits would extend that sort of season structure to the remainder of hunting district 101. So, so that would again be 3 weeks open to general tag on a general license. The last 2 weeks be restricted to permit holders. I think, again, as Neil mentioned, the antlerless elk shoulder season opportunity, those rather than a permit where you would have to use the permit in conjunction with your general license, it would be transitioned into a actual B license. So there would be opportunity for folks to harvest more than one elk in these hunting districts. Apart from that, I think that covers most of what's happening in 101 and 109.
Any questions? Thanks, Ethan. Any questions
Yeah.
out there on any of these proposed changes? Ethan, how many permits are with?
Currently, there are 10 permits in hunting district 109. And for mule deer, and then for antlerless, for elk, there's 50. 50 for the shoulder season permits.
Perfect, thanks.
Yep.
Yeah, any questions for Ethan? Jacob Dresick, awesome. Jacob, go ahead.
Yeah, is there a proposal at all to up the number of, I guess, mule deer permits and then antlerless elk with those shoulder seasons, being there's 2 hunting districts being combined at this time?
So for the antlerless elk, no, because already the 50 permits that are there are valid in both hunting districts already. So that one, really, we're not proposing any sort of increase. We need, if this proposal starts to move through, we need to discuss and kind of work through what the mule deer whether or not we need more mule deer permits in there based off of sort of, distribution of deer and kind of where pressure might be put. But currently there isn't any proposals on the table, but we're honestly just kind of waiting for feedback to see whether or not this is a good option or not.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Thanks, Jacob. Any other questions out there? Raise your hand or type them into the chat. Oh, so it looks like we have a question from Caitlin. She asks, will there be restrictions to only 1 elk take per day when 2 licenses are held? Or is there an accidental or purposeful opportunity to harvest 2 elk in the same day?
So thanks, Caitlin. No, there wouldn't be any restrictions preventing a hunter from harvesting 2 elk in a single day, as long as they had a valid cow license and then harvested an antlered elk as well, a bull, brow tine bull. So, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Caitlin. All right. Seeing none, I'll stop sharing here. Oh, nice. We got another one. All right. Fishes, I see your hands up. Fishes, I'm going to allow you talking. If you could unmute yourself, go ahead. There should be a way to just click the unmute on your computer now, Fishes, and you should be able to talk. So you've got the permission to chat, Fishes, or if I don't know if you're not seeing a prompt that allows you to unmute on your end. Well, we might keep moving along, Fishes, and then if you can figure out the mute on your end, feel free to chime in. But you've got the permission to chat whenever you get the mute button figured out there.
Yeah, the mute button is on the lower left-hand corner of your screen.
Yep. Yeah. Thanks, Ethan. You can also type your question into the chat too, if that's, or the Q&A, I should say. And there we've got a question, Ethan, it looks like from Dorian in the chat or in the Q&A. Dorian asks, what is the current mule deer population for 109 and 101?
All right, so mule deer in 101 and 109, we don't have a population estimate. One, because they're incredibly difficult to survey up in this timbered country. But what we do monitor are population trends based off of harvest. And what we've seen since essentially the mid to late 90s is a general population decline in both hunting districts. As that's kind of gone through the years, it's cycled up and down a bit, but we're kind of sitting steady at about a 10-year average, which is much lower than it was, again, prior to the 90s. But we don't have an actual estimate for either of those hunting districts for a number. Does that answer your question? You have a follow-up?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Dorian. And yep, Dorian, that is a good enough answer. Thank you. Awesome. Thanks for the question. All right.
Thanks, Dorian.
Unfortunately, the fishes, it doesn't seem like we're getting the mute button figured out on their end, but keep trying and we'll let you chime in whenever we get that figured out, what's going on there. So I think next up, thank you, Ethan. And Ethan will be sticking around. And he's got a couple other presentations to still give. So if you think of any other questions for that one, we'll be able to answer them. So next up, we're going to go to Hunting District 103 and
Fishes, if you can't figure it out, you can give me a call on my office number. It will ring to my cell phone and I can talk to you about that as well. So my number is 751-4585. That's 751-4585 if you can't get through. I want to make sure your question gets asked.
Yeah, definitely. Or you typed a question in the chat earlier. So that's the Q&A. That's a good place to get a question in as well.
Dylan, I failed to mention that the southern boundary adjustment of Hunting District 10, the new 101 and 103, 102 there. It's mostly just right down here. Perfect. Yeah. So current boundary. So on the southern end of 101, currently northern end of 102, the boundary at one point jumps onto the forest administrative boundary before hitting the hydrologic divide between Martin Creek and Sunday Creek there. Again, as per our objectives of this simplification process, we're trying to make this more easily identifiable versus having an administrative boundary that is oftentimes unclear or what side of the divide you're on. So for those familiar with the area, the boundary's actually been moved north to that Sunday Creek Road, which will tie back into Cripple Horse there, and it actually follows the road. So just wanted to mention that one.
Thanks, Ethan. And it looks like the fishes were able to type in their question, so I'll read it for you. Regarding mule deer 101, 109, wouldn't not being allowed to harvest a buck the last 2 weeks reduce opportunity and create more work for wardens? And if this tentative goes through, is the public comment on number of licenses issued?
Hey, I'm glad they were able to get the comment in. So thank you for that question. So yes, it would be a reduction in opportunity during the last 2 weeks of the season for hunters in what is currently Hunting District 101. More work for the wardens. If 109 seems to be it seems to go pretty smoothly. We don't seem to have a lot of poaching or attempts to hunt that out of season. But there's certainly always an adjustment period with any of these. If the tentative goes through, yes, there will be time to discuss the number of permits or the number of licenses, or it would be permits, permits within that larger hunting district. Maybe back on that November timeline, if I'm correct, Dylan.
Yep, correct.
All right.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
Yeah.
All right. Without further ado, thank you. Yeah, thank you for the question. All right, without further ado, we're gonna move to 103, Hunting District 103. And Neil Anderson's gonna present on that one. So Neil, let me know, Neil, if you'd rather have, the interactive map, or I've got different all kinds of maps. I guess let me know what you would like, but the floor is yours.
Yep, I think that map will suffice. So yeah, as Ethan mentioned, one thing I didn't mention is one of the directives that we had was to try to reduce the number of hunting districts. And so you'll see the area biologists have proposed areas where we thought biologically we could combine districts without a whole lot of implications for the resource out there. And this is another one of those, just like Ethan had proposed. So the first proposal that we put out there was to combine hunting districts 102 and 103. And they would be labeled with a new 103, a much larger 103, but a new 103. And we kept hunting district 103 name because of the Lost Trail area, which most people are really familiar with in terms of elk hunting, and thought it might be less confusing overall. So that proposal would be to combine those two districts into one, and we call it 103. I think Ethan already mentioned the boundary change between 101 and 102, so I won't cover that. And then the other change that we would be proposing is in line with the directive to remove one small numbers of permits or licenses, as well as remove sections of a hunting district. So right now in 103, there's a kind of a north unit, 103-50 is what we typically refer to it as. But in that unit for mule deer, it is limited draw for bucks. And so right now there are 13 licenses or permits 13 permits available. That's under what we capped at 25, and it's also a portion of a district. So given the directions that we've received, we put that on the docket for discussion. It's a fairly recent change. It changed about 4 years ago. So that would remove that district. One of the things when you're looking at our maps or those definitions, we also put what our biological concerns were. Right now, I think the biggest biological concern for hunting district 103 is chronic wasting disease. We've not found it in the permit area yet, but it is close. There is some information that suggests that limited areas which increase the buck to doe ratios also have higher CWD prevalence, but we've not seen that in this unit yet. So this is primarily a change based on the directives that we received from the director's office to remove portions and small numbers of licenses or permits. Any questions on that?
Well, looks like we got a question from Dorian in the chat. Dorian asks, when did 103-50 get 13 permits instead of 5?
So thanks, Dorian, thanks for the question. So when it was first passed, the biologist out there, Tanya, had a range where she could adjust the number of permits. And so to try to address some of our issues and concerns about not getting enough samples to actually be able to assess the CWD issue up there, whether we had it or not, she increased it up to 13. She could have gone to 15, but I know there's some folks that only wanted to see about 10. We kind of split the difference and went with 13. So, but that was well within her ability. We didn't take commission action. It's something we could just do because it was within a range that the commission approved. So that went into effect will be in effect this year for this season.
So this will be the first hunting season where there'll be 13 permits issued. The last 2 hunting seasons, there's only been 5 issued, correct?
That's correct. Yep. This is the first year with 13.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you for the question, Dorian. Any other questions out there?
I'll just follow. Yeah, Dylan, I may just follow up with Dorian. One of the issues with those changes like that is that the regulations are printed fairly early in March. And we have until like June to make these changes based on biological information or other factors. So often they won't appear in the regulations, which is unfortunate. That it's just a logistical issue with when the regulations are printed and when we can get those changes in. So that's why it doesn't show up in the regulations booklet.
All right, Neil, not seeing any questions. I want to keep us moving along tonight. So again, and Dorian says that is good to know. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the question, Dorian. You'll always have a chance to circle back if something comes to mind on 103. So moving on next down the list, back to Ethan, Hunting District 110. And this one is pretty simple, but I'll just kind of keep you hovered over 110, Ethan. And if you need me to open anything, let me know. But go ahead, Ethan.
Perfect. Yeah. 110, southern portion of the Whitefish Range, North Fork of the Flathead area. Most everything is going to remain same in 110. The exception is there are 5 antlerless permits for elk within that hunting district. So that fell within the, low number of permits, trying to simplify it. And honestly, biologically, there's not a whole lot of justification to maintain those 5 permits in the North Fork. So within this process, we'd be removing those.
Any questions on that? And we'll have a couple other hunting districts that are similarly. And that's just, as Ethan said, was kind of a statewide directive to find those types of very small number of permits. And if there weren't biological impacts, to go away with them. So open to questions though, if anything doesn't make sense there. All right, that was easy, Ethan. Thank you. Next up, we're going to go to Jesse Coltrane in Hunting District 120. Go ahead, Jesse.
Okay, thanks, Dylan. So this is very similar to the proposal that we just heard in 110. It would eliminate 5 antlerless elk license in 120. And that would be keeping in alignment with simplification, reducing anything under 25. And so currently there's small elk herd in 120. And this is simply a regulation simplification proposal.
Did you say, Jesse, how many permits are there again? Is it 5?
There's 5, right?
5. Yeah.
Then
All
you have
right. Questions for Jesse? All right. Seeing none, Jesse, I guess you're still up. We'll bounce over to 130.
Okay, so in 130, which is the Swan District, this we would, similar to 120, we have 5 antlerless permits there for elk in 130, and keeping in line with the directive for simplification, we would propose to remove that hunting opportunity there for antlerless elk. In addition, we do have a limited draw antlered mule deer buck permit in the Mission Mountain Wilderness portion of 130, which is a 130-50, and we issued 10 tags for that hunt. And keeping with the simplification, we would also propose to eliminate that mule deer hunting opportunity there in the missions as well. So this would result, in some loss of hunting opportunity for both antlerless elk, as well as the folks that drew those permits for antlered mule deer bucks in the Mission Mountain portion of 130.
Great. Any questions, Jesse? Or any questions for Jesse? All right. Jacob, yeah, go ahead, Jacob.
So would you not be able to hunt mule deer at all in the Mission Mountain Wilderness then?
So the 130, so you could still hunt antlered bucks with your general deer license in 130. The reason why we had that limited permit area was because usually during the season, the snow depth makes it pretty difficult to get into that area, and the mule deer, because that's how south facing slope, so it accumulates snow pretty rapidly. North facing slopes. A lot of the mule deer pop over to the reservation side where they are then inaccessible for hunters who aren't tribal to access those mule deer. And so this hunt was created to provide an opportunity to access deer when they were in the actual district and before the snow depth became just really difficult for people to get in there. So there would still be the general 130, you could still on your general deer license harvest an antlered mule deer buck in 130.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Jake. Yeah, it's that mule deer buck, that's an early season. So that one, if you draw that one, you can start hunting September 15th this year, for example. So you'd just be able to do mule deer bucks during the general season. And this is a similar draft change as the 103-50 as far as kind of that sub portion district. So any other questions? Okay, seeing none. Jesse, I think you're up and again, 150.
Okay, so 150 is wilderness, Bob Marshall Wilderness Hunting District. And a couple of years ago, we combined 150 and 151, which were managed completely the same for deer, elk, and lions and bear and pretty much everything. So we'd already combined those. And so this proposal would actually add HD 280, which is south of there in region 2 into 150. And it has very similar hunting regulations for deer and elk, which is why we look to do that. The deer and elk are largely migratory in that area. A lot of the elk from 280 move into 150 at some point during the year. The one thing that would be a loss of opportunity by combining these districts is currently in 280, there is some antlerless elk hunting opportunity for archery and youth seasons, as well as antlerless whitetail deer opportunity. And so those would be eliminated to align with the current 150 regulations, which do not allow antlerless elk harvest. So that would be the big change there. But basically it would take 280 and put it into 150 and then align all of the current regulations with what's currently in 150. So we'd have the early rifle for elk, but antlered elk only.
Okay, thank you, Jesse. Any questions?
Okay,
All right, well, thank you, Jesse.
thank you.
Yeah, and next up, we will go to Mike Ebinger. Mike, you are up for Hunting District 200 or 123, 124, 200, however we want to call it.
Thanks, Dylan. Yeah, based on the simplification directives, this is similar to Jesse's previous proposal where we're combining districts across regions. In this case, it's getting the label HD 200, but that is really just a label. Biological and enforcement duties will still fall to Thompson Falls area biologists and wardens in the 123, 124 area. We'll be combining those two and combining them with 200. And we're proposing right now to have 50 B tags in that area and 50 deer B tags. So the same for both elk and deer.
All right, any questions for Mike? Thank you, Mike. if anybody is unclear on any of these boundary changes, let me know and I can zoom in with the interactive map, which has a little more detail on roads and creeks and all that. So.
Hey, Mike, I might have you talk to folks about what that change means in terms of elk licenses from what's currently there, and it would be a little bit of loss of opportunity because of the change.
Sure, Neil. Right now we have 50 permits in 123 and 25 and 124, and there's only 5 in 200. And we're proposing to change it to 50 overall for the 200 area. So it would be an increase for those in area 200 and decrease in opportunity for 123 and 124 when you think about how those would be allocated spatially.
Does that make sense to everybody? Any questions on that? All right. Thank you, Mike. I'm going to stop sharing here. And so that is basically all of our Region 1 specific changes. And I'm going to share my screen again to show kind of the timeline. Well, actually, I want to circle back. Casey had a question, and Neil, I don't know if you are the right person for this one. Casey asked, could we touch base on the statewide proposals? Are the general rifle season dates and archery general season dates being changed? Is the archery season going to be shorter than the current 6 weeks, and the rifle season shorter than the current 5 weeks? And so what Casey's referring to here, and I'll share my screen again so you can kind of see where these would be. Here on this main season setting changes page, you scroll down past the map, and at the very top here, statewide proposals. And there are a few statewide proposals, and we can open them up here. And I'll try to zoom in so folks can see it. But this top one is what Casey's referring to. And Neil, I know you weren't involved in this proposed change or draft change, but do you kind of want to explain this a little bit?
Yeah, I have been involved in the discussion. So right now there's no proposal to change. I think if you read that, it's asking the question, should there be a change? And this is directly related to some of the areas where we're extremely over objective in elk, and for whatever reasons don't seem to be able to bring things in line. And so we have things like shoulder seasons and special seasons to try to increase harvest there. And so the question is, well, if we have to keep adjusting our season to try to improve harvest, maybe it's the general season is just occurring at the wrong time. And so I think what you see there is a question, and it's an open-ended question to the public and the sportsmen. Should we be looking at changing some of those season dates? The one that we've had is very historic, and it's been in place for almost as long as Montana's had hunting seasons. Is it the right time period? Is it the right length? And so I think that's, like I say, an open-ended question. Right now, there's no proposal to do that, but I think they're looking for input from the public as to whether that would be something that folks would like to see and whether we should actually entertain that. Does that answer your question, Casey? It's a good question because it's a little bit confusing there.
Yeah, so thanks for that question, Casey. Yep, it does. He says, thank you. Well, thanks for the question. All right. I mean, if anyone's curious, I think the other statewide changes are more kind of like turkeys, getting the turkey season dates all on the same cycle. Is that right, Neil?
Yeah, trying to expand the season a little bit, as well as get everything consistent in terms of turkey season dates, so that they start at the same time, they end at the same time, and it's also consistent from year to year. Right now, the turkey season date changes depending on what year. This would be April 15 to into May every year.
Yeah, nice. And Casey, he's got his hand up. So nice. Casey, go ahead. Unmute yourself and
Can
Go
you
ahead.
hear me again?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, back on that same page, and maybe this is the same type of open-ended question, but right there where you're scrolled out, Dylan, that's talking about the elk permits and versus deer buck permits, where if you get a, is it time to where mule deer, if you get that permit, you can only hunt mule deer in that district. Is this still the same type of open-ended question as far as if you get a elk permit, like say you get a breaks tag, I mean, that's the only district you can hunt an antlered elk, and is that kind of what we're getting at with that? Is that just kind of an open-ended question again, kind of like the season dates?
Yeah, I guess I'm not seeing, are you talking about the part
Right
that,
here, Neil, this part.
um,
So if a hunter draws a limited bull elk permit, should they be
Right.
restricted to hunting only in that district during the season? Or should they be allowed to?
Yeah, and in a lot of our districts across the state, actually, when you do draw a special opportunity, whether that's primarily on a permit for antlered animals, it does restrict you to only being able to harvest an animal in that district. So if you drew a bull tag, you could only shoot a bull in that district. If you drew a antlered buck mule deer, you could only shoot an antlered buck mule deer in that district. And I think that is that same kind of open-ended question. Is that something that folks like to see? Or is that something we should maybe eliminate and allow people opportunity to, if you're in a different area and you happen to see a bull and you want to harvest that animal, should you be able to, recognizing that you now forfeit your permit, that your permit's no longer valid because you've just harvested an animal. So yeah, it is that same kind of open-ended question.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was making sure, because I was just curious, because like I know, like if you draw a breaks tag now, you can go you can go outside of Bozeman if you want, and even if you got that, like say a breaks tag, but you're hunting for the weekend and you see a bull, you can still shoot. I get you can't go back and hunt the breaks.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I just, because I've never, yeah, I haven't been come across, I've actually never got a tag to where you can, where if you get the elk tag, you can't hunt a bull elk somewhere else. But okay, that's fine. Now it clarifies it's just an open-ended, so.
Yeah, and there are a lot more mule deer permits that are that way, where if you draw the mule deer permit, you can only hunt mule deer in that district.
Right, and that's what I'm familiar with, not so much on the elk, but okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Yep, you bet. Thanks, Casey.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Casey, because that's another good one. That's just throwing out an idea there that, just because we've been doing it that way for forever, is that the right way to do it? And that's something our directors really asked us. Just because we've been doing it that way, well, that doesn't necessarily mean it's the right way. So we just kind of want to look at everything. So that is the kind of the whole breakdown or rundown of Region 1. So, we'll open it up for general questions. I do want to kind of just show you again here, just to make sure folks aren't confused in any way, shape, or form. If you have comments about anything, we went over and say, you disagree or you agree, please let us know. We really want, our biologists want to know. And the best way to do that is by right here, going down here to this comment online, putting, okay, I want to comment on HD 101, type it in. If you want to comment on multiple ones, you can do that. If you just type it in a way we know what you're commenting on. And those are all being collected in one place. And that'll also help, when the commission is now going to review everything here in December, it'll help to have all this input for them to review as well. So,
Dylan, would you mind doing me a favor? I just want to kind of point something out. If you want to go to one there and then go to Jesse's, the 130 district. And Jesse talked a little bit about this, but if you look at, so specifically talking about that early season or early time period, limited draw for mule deer bucks. So that 130-50, typically give out about 10 of those. And as Jesse mentioned, that's for an early season opportunity to give folks kind of a opportunity to hunt in a very special area early with a rifle. But I did want to point out, so what we also put down there were biological implications. So this is a good example where there's really not a biological justification for doing this. We don't think that's an issue for the population, but it is purely for the purposes of simplification of the regulations. And so I just point that out. So if folks like to keep stuff like that, if you really want that or you don't like it, either way, but we need those comments because we can take those comments then and say, hey, maybe this is a very popular hunt with folks. There's no biological implications. Yes, it does simplify the regulations, but there's overwhelming support for it, or if there's not support for it. But just want to point that out and kind of stress how important those comments really are.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. Any questions on all that? And this is just an opportunity, you know, we're at 7:06. We've gotten through all of our hunting district kind of conceptual ideas. You can see the timeline here. You've got a little under a week to keep putting in some comments. And like Neil said, you know, please, if you have a strong feeling for or against any of these changes, we want to hear about it, because that's how we can make sure that us and the commission are making informed decisions. So, but this isn't going to be your only chance to comment. So as you can see from this timeline, after October 20th, our biologists and managers are going to look through all this feedback that we're getting, and we're getting a lot of feedback. I can't remember the last count. Mike, you might know. I mean, a little over 75 to 100 comments, maybe more than that. But they're going to look through all that that's relevant to their districts, and then work with our director, Hank Warsek, and his staff. And then they're going to present the formal proposals to the Fish and Wildlife Commission for them to review. And then at the December 14th commission meeting, the commission will look through a whole list of what will then be tentative changes, and they will decide whether to move forward with those proposals for another 30-day comment period. So then, you know, whatever comes out after December 14th, that is then when the official comments will really need to come in, and we'll have another meeting. We're not sure if we're going to be able to do an in-person meeting or if we're going to do another virtual meeting like this, but that's where it'll be a little more like our other traditional meetings, if you've been to one, where it's kind of like a public hearing where we will present the proposal and then ask any comments, and then your comments will be on the record. So that process will start after the December 14th meeting. And then in early February, the commission will look at all the comments and decide what moves forward and is adopted. Neil, did I miss something?
Yep, no, the only thing I want to make sure folks understand is that, you know, at that the December 14 meeting, the commission will review proposals both for the simplification process that we've just touched on now, as well as any other proposals. So there could be other proposals that come forward beyond the simplification process. Again, we're in our, what we typically call our scoping period. And so there could be some other changes to regulations that are not listed here. Just to want to make sure folks are aware of this. This is really only touching on the simplification process.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. Is there any questions? Anything just in general, anything we need to go back on? Any confusion?
Timothy's
anywhere?
got a question.
What's that? Oh yeah, Timothy, there we go. Awesome, thanks, Mike. So Timothy Garrison asks, future Hunting District 200 will offer 50 B tags, but currently offers 50 plus 25 plus 5 for 80. So I understand the potential to pull 50 out of the old Hunting District 200, but what drives the number 50 for the combined area? Will this number be revised to consider 55 or 80, or will it stay 50 until we meet again in 2 years? So yeah, good question, Timothy. Thank you. Mike, that one's for you.
Sure. Thanks, Timothy. It's a good question. And part of this is just taking a conservative approach to combining these three regions. We obviously lose the spatial control of where those are applied under the 50, 25, and 5 across the current 3 districts. And there will be opportunity to comment on this and consider different numbers. So you're not locked into 50. It's something that we want feedback on and discussion on.
Sure, yeah, I think the one thing I might add to that for this and for other districts is that one of the concerns when you combine districts, and Mike touched on this, is that some areas might be easier to access or have higher numbers of animals. And so when you group districts and you just add in all those licenses together, you could, like Mike said, you lose that spatial control. And you could end up over harvesting elk in an area where they're just more accessible or it's a more popular area. So that's one of the things that the staff here had to think about when we're trying to combine districts, what those impacts are, because you do lose a little bit of that spatial control, as Mike mentioned.
And that's one of those things, if you have a concern on that, that we encourage you to comment online.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question, Timothy?
All right. Any other questions out there? General questions about the specifics. Feel free to raise your hand and I'll unmute you, or you can type it into the Q&A box. All right. Well, I mean, we can hang around here for a few minutes longer in case anything pops up, but I guess we'll just say thanks to everybody who attended. And if you have any questions, please contact our biologist. There's a place here. I'll show it on the website again. If you go to this main website, and again, I'll go right to the homepage so you can find it. So you go to our main homepage, and right here on the left side, comment by October 20th. Click on that one. Here's the timeline. You can ask questions for our biologists through this portal. So you can click that thing and ask your question this way. Or if you know specifically where you have a question, go back down here to this Region 1 tab, open this up and say, okay, I've got a question on the 110 proposal. Click on that PDF and, oops, let me see here. You open the PDF and right there, that's the biologist to contact. So at the bottom of each of those PDFs, there's contact information. So you could give Jesse or Ethan or Mike or Neil a call, and they're happy to answer any questions for you. So, see, Jeff's got a comment. Thanks for the meeting. How many onlookers are present? Well, we had 13 at one point, and we're at 11 right now. So it's not going to break any records, but I appreciate those who did tune in tonight. And there's a question from Dorian. Okay. Would the hybrid mule deer season for the new HD 101 affect archery season? So Ethan, I'll let you tackle that one.
Yeah, that's me. No, it wouldn't. Right now, archery season is open, and this proposal wouldn't change anything for that, just the general season.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Dorian. All right, so I hope I've ad nauseum explained the website. We tried to make this as simple as possible for folks to find information and to comment. But I will hang on here a few minutes longer if anybody has any last minute questions. Otherwise, I appreciate everybody tuning in tonight. Thank you, staff, for bearing with me in the Zoom world. And everybody have a great night.
Yes, thanks, everybody. Thanks for attending. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the great questions tonight, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.